Welcome to Debate 1 live on EDU. I'd like to welcome two guests who will be discussing this bill that everyone's talking about, this PWDEO bill. For those persons out there who are not familiar, this is the Persons with Disabilities Equal Opportunities Bill. In the studio, we have Miss Tiffany Turnquest and Miss Lavender Clare. Ladies, good day.
Good day.
Good day.
Can you explain, Ms. Turnquest, to our listeners, what is this bill that everyone's talking about?
Well, on the 24th of September 2013, the Bahamas ratified the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, with the commitment to take legislative measures to end discrimination against persons with disabilities, as well as promote their rights and advance equal opportunities. To achieve this end, the Persons with Disabilities Bill was enacted into law. In 55 articles, the bill outlines and provides statutory governance, funding, and other support for 13 fundamental rights of persons with disabilities, namely the right to 1. Employment, 2. Vocational training skills, development and training programs that enables them to compete favorably for gainful employment, 3. Freedom from employer discrimination, 4. Job placement assistance, 5. Healthcare services, 6. Affordable and suitable housing, 7. Accessibility and mobility, 8. Physical access to public buildings, that is, by means of accessibility design and designated parking, 9. Public transportation, 10. Service animals, 11. Auxiliary social services, 12. Sports and recreation, and 13. Suffrage.
That's a lot, but why do we need this bill, Miss Clare?
Yes, the objective of the bill is to provide the rights and rehabilitations and habilitations of persons with disabilities, to eliminate discrimination against persons with disabilities, to achieve equalization of opportunities for persons with disabilities, to establish the National Commission for Persons with Disabilities, and for connected purposes. As it relates to schools specifically, that's what we're really here to talk about. The salient features of Part 5 education are as follows. In Article 30, free primary and secondary education trained teachers, it states that the Minister of Education, in collaboration with the Commission, will formulate and implement a national education program which is aimed at increasing the availability of teachers specializing in disabilities for special schools and integrated schools for children with disabilities through the development and implementation of training programs for teachers, and by making special education a compulsory component of the curriculum offered by institutions established to train teachers. Article 31, Access to Quality Education, states that the Minister, after consultation with the Commission, will ensure that special requirements for persons with disabilities are factored into educational policies and programs, and that learning institutions also take into consideration the special needs of persons with disabilities with respect to the entry requirements, curriculum, examination, auxiliary needs, and services including accessible formatting, use of school facilities, class schedules, physical education requirements, and other relevant matters. Article 32, Integration of Persons with Disabilities in Schools, states that the Minister will promote the integration of students with disabilities into all schools and learning institutions. He will promote the establishment of special public and private schools for persons in need of special education and ensure that such schools are equipped with vocational training facilities, as well as encourage the development of a support system for special education in schools. Article 33, Special Education, states that the Minister is charged with establishing and maintaining an integrated system of special education for persons with disabilities, and is also responsible for establishing special education classes in schools to facilitate learning in subject areas including Braille, alternative script, augmentative and alternative modes, means, and formats of communication, orientation, and mobility skills.
You gave our listeners certainly a whole lot to digest. I see the phone lines lighting up. People want to call in and have their views heard. Caller number 1, are you there? Yeah, Lady T, I hear. Caller number 1. Now, you have anything to add to this discussion? Now, Lady T, you know I call you all the time. My name is Latia Strawn, and I have something to say. Many may argue that providing educational services to children with disabilities within the ordinary education structure is best. Now, in fact, according to Article 26 of the UN Standard Rules of the Equalization of Opportunities for Persons with Disabilities, that was in 1994, it is right. That's what they say. I'm hearing what Miss Claire and Miss Turnquist is telling you, Lady too, but I'm telling you, not everyone is excited about bringing students with disabilities into their general education classroom, and for good reasons. General education classrooms are not the most appropriate environment, Lady T, for this rehabilitation of these students with disabilities as it relates to teaching and learning. Wow. Thank you, caller. Thank you, caller. I see we have another caller on the line. Let's see what this other caller has to say. Hello, caller, are you there?
Yes, I am.
I hear some echo in the background. Can you please turn your radio down for me? Is it down?
Yes, I think it's down.
All right, can you introduce yourself to the viewing audience? What's your name?
Okay, my name is Andrea Smith, and I'm currently an educator. One of the most basic arguments for full inclusion is the least restrictive environment. However, to present such an argument to justify the optimality of a regular classroom without taking into consideration the conduciveness of other situational factors is negligent. As recognized in the landmark case of Wyatt versus Stickney in 1972, least restrictiveness is not the only determinant of suitability of an educational environment. The helpfulness of least restricted circumstances to the achievement of habilitation goals is equally important. As the Council for Exceptional Children concisely puts it, a child should be educated in the least restrictive environment in which his or her educational and related needs can be satisfactorily provided. That said, PWDEOB speaks only of equipping the classrooms in special schools for children with disabilities, with no provision for funding or mention of intent for the universal design of or reasonable accommodations within integrated schools. It is incomprehensible to even imagine that students with disabilities will learn more in ill-equipped general education classrooms than in the special education classroom, which will be designed for their special needs in mind and fully outfitted with vocational training facilities to support the curricula.
We certainly have a lot of educated listeners out there. Ladies, did you hear them?
We sure did.
Before we break, we have another caller. I think I want to take this. Caller, are you there?
Hello.
Yes. Caller, what do you want to add to this discussion that's going on right now?
Hi, I just want to say this is my first time calling
Your
in.
first time? Okay, what's your name, caller?
It's Heather Naval.
Great, continue.
I just wanted to add that students with disabilities require the structure offered in special education classrooms to truly benefit academically. Article 20, Accessibility and Mobility of the bill identifies the right of person with disabilities to a barrier-free and disabled-friendly environment. Woolfolk suggests that for students with orthopedic impairments, a barrier-free environment would mean one that provides ample space for unobstructed movement around the room. After taking into account the size of an average public school classroom on New Providence, the space used up for implements for approximately 30 to 35 students and one teacher, and that required for the movement along passageways between desks, certainly all can agree that this leaves limited space to facilitate the unobstructed movement of, for example, students confined to wheelchairs. This issue of limited space is also a safety concern, as students with epilepsy, for example, could have a seizure at any time and could be at risk of striking a hard surface during the violent jerking. And nobody really wants that, do they?
No, definitely not.
Further, regular classrooms do not contain instructional accommodations for all students with disabilities, as some require special furnishing and equipment for which no financial resources have been allocated. For example, students with cerebral palsy require specially designed desks that enable them to participate independently in class. Students with visual impairments require assistive technology such as large print books and keyboards, special computers, text-to-speech software, amongst others. Blind students require Braille instruction, which according to Article 33 is to include alternative script, augmentative and alternative modes, means and formats of communication, orientation, and mobility skills. Certainly, the libraries of all integrated schools will also have to be supplied with a wide range of information tools to ensure that all students have equal opportunities to expand their knowledge. The same applies for computer labs, and there are insufficient regular computers in schools as it is. And that's all I have to say about that.
That's a good much. I mean, we have these very interesting points, Ms. Turnquest and Ms. Claire, that you're causing our listeners to respond to. Now, I see that we have more calls. Now, let's take this next call. Caller, are you there? Caller, are you there? I think we lost that caller. Let's see if we can take another caller. Hello, are you there? Yes, I'm here. I called earlier, Lady T, and I have to call back to straighten these people out. Let me tell you, according to Article 28, Lady T, on the UN's Convention on the Rights of Children, now this their rights in this country, that we as the Bahamas were signatories to that, for those persons who don't know. Now, that right that we sign gives students and children an inalienable right to education in such a manner that they have to develop their talents, mental, physical abilities to the fullest potential, and I mean fullest. It seems highly likely that the full inclusion of disabled students in general education classroom could hinder the optimum development of both students with and without disabilities, as it will spread the already limited resources of teachers way too thin. Now, Bender, he wrote a paper in, I think, about 2007. He pointed out that behavioral issues of students with disabilities in general settings often stem from their frustration in learning endeavors, which is caused by difficulty with assignments and from overt ridicule, bias, and hostility from peers, and unfortunately to some teachers as well. Now, the full inclusion discourse often focuses more on the learning outcomes of students with disabilities, with little regard for the negative consequences to non-disabled students. And I have a problem with that. Could not their disutility in the learning process also lead to yet another bill-worthy cause? In Vygotsky's view, cognitive processes are shaped by social processes. To me, this seems to suggest that the possibility exists that non-disabled students can learn the suicidal behaviors of students with emotional disorders, or let's say the inappropriate play skills of students with autism spectrum disorders, and that through the ease of social comparisons, slow students, as some students call them, can easily come to believe that they too have specific learning or intellectual disabilities. To be honest, this argument against full inclusion can extend also to our high flyers. You know what I mean? Our gifted and talented students who generally can become bored in the classroom. And you know why they become bored? They become bored because the pace of the lesson is too slow, and they're always continuously waiting for their teachers to catch up to them. Now, in classrooms where lessons may be even more simplified and slow-going, these same gifted and talented students may not only become gravely irritated, but may also suffer major learning setbacks. And I don't think that's fair, and that's all I have to add to this discussion. Thank you, caller. You definitely gave a mouthful. Now, we have another caller on the line. Caller, what can you add to this? What's your name, caller?
My name is Rashade Hasty.
I know some Hasties. Hey, Hasty, what you have to add to this discussion, this provocative topic that we have going?
Okay, so what I want to know is, what about the teachers? As it stands, they are already tasked with accommodating a wide range of cognitive abilities and styles and learning preferences of students without disabilities. And more than a few researchers suggest that providing effective instruction to students with disabilities is a full-time job in itself. For example, Woolfolk emphasizes that each type of disability calls for a special educational consideration. Students with emotional disturbances benefit from behavioral management approaches with very clear rules and consequences that are consistently enforced. The deaf-blind benefit from individualized education programs designed based on their learning needs and goals, and multisensory presentation techniques. And those with multiple disabilities tend to benefit from individualized education programs, which are in alignment with a transition program. With these role strains, it is not reasonable to expect that one teacher, can equally commit to the extraction of the natural abilities and development of the academic aptitudes of both students with and without disabilities. Certainly, one group will benefit more at the expense of the other. Even more, Article 30 suggests that training in sign language, Braille, and other methods for teaching students with disabilities may become compulsory for teachers and to-be teachers, an attempt to make all teachers specialized irrespective of their interests. Woolfolk warns that successful inclusion will largely depend on the teacher's knowledge and being well prepared, receiving the support they need to teach, and being committed to inclusion. Hence, it is important not to confuse training with preparedness. Norman Castle and Stefanich demonstrate this well in their examination of teacher preparedness to teach students with disabilities in inclusive science classrooms in the United States. In a sample of 300 teachers, they found that only a small minority of primary, junior high, and senior high school teachers reported feeling adequately prepared to teach students with specific disabilities despite having received formal training. Further, 65.1% of primary, 87% of junior high, and 82.6% of senior high school teachers expressed concerns that they cannot successfully design, select, and modify activities for students with disabilities. With this possibility in view, one must critically consider if training and supplementary aids and services will fully compensate for teachers' ill preparedness for full inclusion of all students with disabilities.
Wow, thank you, Hasty. Now, we had callers, ladies, speaking to the students who are going to be affected, the teachers that are going to be affected. So it seems as if there are so many stakeholders involved in this full inclusion. Now, Miss Claire, what's the last thoughts you want to leave with our listening audience, Miss Claire?
Well, Lady T, from the perspective of future teachers, you see, because I represent a small body of to-be teachers in this Bahamas. And from our perspective, such an innovation can disincentivize entry and commitment to the profession due to teachers' lack of preparedness to work with students with disabilities, unreasonable job demands and job stress, and, of course, inadequate compensation. We foresee a synergy between these circumstances, which can be counterproductive to increasing the labor supply of both primary and secondary school teachers in general.
Now, see, when you talk about this incentivization of teachers, Miss Claire, I myself get emotional because my mother was a teacher. And I remember many times her coming home and complaining about the work that she already has. So can you imagine, Miss Claire, what's going to be presented of this full inclusion process? Now, Ms. Turnquest, what can you offer the very last points you want to tell our listening audience?
Well, in light of these complex potentialities, we have to refer once more to the inalienable right of all children to be educated in such a manner that develops their talents and mental and physical abilities to their fullest potential. Full inclusion is a grand ideal, we all agree, but the harsh reality is that in lieu of proper implementation This innovation can have significant negative consequences on the learning outcomes of both students with and without disabilities. All children are special, and the best interests of all should be factored into that equation. It is inequitable to dilute the learning experience of students in an effort to provide a universal solution to equalization of opportunities. Further, it is inequitable to ask teachers who are not fully trained to deal with all facets of learner disabilities, to tailor effective lessons to rehabilitate students with disabilities that may range from mildly disabled to severely disabled, whilst also satisfying the learning needs of students without disabilities, whom also possess degrees in their abilities and development. Now, if the learner is the focus of the teacher, the main objective is to teach the student holistically. A full inclusion classroom will indeed be a disservice to the noble profession we call education.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, education is a noble profession, and I'd like to thank our guests because we're out of time. I hear the music playing in the background. Ms. Turnquest and Ms. Claire, thank you for coming today.
Pleasure. Pleasure is all ours.
You've certainly given myself and the Bahamas lots to consider. So thank you, listening audience, and until next time.